Okay, where's the feed coming? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's council meeting. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. It's lovely to see signs. We do allow signs at our meetings, but just to make sure we're on the same page, signs and symbolic materials at council meetings. Let me read our policies and procedures. Members of the public may bring signs or other symbolic material to council meetings in accordance with council adopted policy. No stick, post, pole, or other such items shall be attached to the sign. So if those with sticks, if you could just bring those back to the lobby, that would be great. Okay. Next item, the items must not be raised above shoulder level, whether seated or speaking from the podium. So again, keep them low, not above your shoulder level. Next item of business, we are asking per county guidance that everyone wears a mask. Can you bring that over there? Okay. If you do remove your mask today, we will give you a verbal warning, and we consider wearing a mask having your mask above your nose. If you do not listen to the verbal warning, we will ask the police to escort you out if you do not keep your mask on. And then third, while we love to have public participation, anything that is disruptive, demeaning, we will call it recess. We're here to listen to issues. We're here to listen to disagreements. We're not here to listen to insults. With that, I will now turn to Ms. Neese, our clerk, to begin roll call.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Hudis.
Here.
Councilmember Badami.
Here.
Councilmember Risto.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rennie.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Sayak.
Here. Thank you. And we still have an echo. Can we?
They're working on it. And then I've turned this on, but I'm going to go turn the TV on in the lobby so the people that are standing can watch out there.
Okay, great. And because we do have an overflow, we are going to turn on the TVs in the lobby for those who would prefer to stay outside. What's exciting is we will have our Pledge of Allegiance, and we are asking one of our student leaders to join us. And if we can, Ishani, do you mind joining us? So before we begin, I do want to just brag a little bit about one of our youth leaders. This is Ishani. She is a 10th grader at the Harker School. She's the co-founder of a local nonprofit named Fun with Fencing, whose goal is to teach fencing and mentor young, underprivileged youth in the Bay Area. Partnered with several boys and girls clubs and have reached 150 kids through her programs. She's been working with Martha's Kitchen, a local soup kitchen, for over 5 years, providing different services to aid their meal program. And if you can all stand and join me as we begin. Ishani, please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashani, and welcome again. Thank you for joining us. Okay, let's begin with council manager matters. The council members here, in addition to participating in public meetings, before you do represent the town in other regional events, and so it's their opportunity to share with the public as well as their colleagues activities and decisions they have made on behalf of the town. I will begin with Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. On August 31st, I met with Don Cabobres regarding the second phase of the North 40. On September 2nd, I attended the West Valley Clean Water Authority Board meeting. Later that afternoon, I attended the West Valley Solid Waste Management Authority Board meeting. And on September 4th, I happily attended the end of summer event as sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I did not have a lot of meetings. I did attend the Democracy Tent meeting on Monday, the 23rd of August. And the Democracy Tent is a group that's open to anybody in town. There's a variety of topics that are discussed. Sometimes there's a set agenda. On this Monday, we discussed just a number of things going on in town. But it meets at 10:30 a.m. on Mondays, and you can Google it. There's a schedule, and sometimes they have town officials there to discuss topics, but it's a nice open forum. On the 24th, I was, Mayor Sayak and I were on the policy committee. We met and reviewed the applications for basically our land use commissions, the application forms and the enabling resolution for the Planning Commission, the Historic Preservation Committee, CDAC, and the General Plan. And each of those organizations or boards had given us their recommendations for how to improve or alter the enabling resolutions in the application. And we pretty much agreed with their changes and are forwarding those to the Town Council for further discussion. In addition, we looked at the possibility of a flag policy and realized that flags can
Councilmember
be...
Risto, if someone could please turn off their phone so that we can listen to Councilmember Risto, thank you. And again, just a reminder, please don't raise your signs.
Thank you. Thank you. And we talked about some possibilities for a flag policy, and that will be coming forward to the full council for a complete discussion without recommendation. Today I attended the Safe Routes to School board meeting. With school back in session, there's a number of students walking and biking to school. And the board, actually, of interest to the public would be that Safe Routes to School is looking for more volunteers. Now that we've had a year off, kind of, and volunteers couldn't be on campus, we're recruiting more volunteers to help out with bike rodeos and other activities at the school sites to help encourage safe, active transportation. And the board has opened up 2 more positions. So if anyone's interested in Safe Routes to School, they can contact Director Morley or look up Safe Routes to School. And finally, I also attended the end of summer party with what felt like a good portion of the town of Los Gatos, and it looked like everybody was ready to have a nice celebration. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hudis.
Thank you, Mayor. On August 18, I attended a Let's Talk Housing, which was a county-wide community meeting, the 3rd one in the series. And following that, I had a number of individual meetings with residents concerning the general plan, and specifically the housing part of the general plan. On August 24th, I listened to the Council Policy Committee meeting, and on August 26th, I attended the exhibit at the museum here, the Sawyer Rose exhibit, and it is just opening. I would highly recommend it to folks. Then on September 2nd, I attended another exhibit there that's just about to open called the Los Gatos History Project, and it includes a history wall that's being developed. And I thought it was very interesting as well. And then, let's see, I think that's it prior to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last council meeting, I attended a communications drill at our emergency operating center. That's where we practiced having communication come in for the field, and this was a short notice, show up, without knowing, 2 days ahead of time that we were going to do this. And then we practiced communications breakdown by removing the antenna on one of our repeaters to see if the field could get information into our emergency operating center, and that was on 8/21. On 8/26, the county's Emergency Operating Area Council, of which I represent the West Valley and South County, met, and one thing of interest was PG&E presented, and I and Chair Wasserman both emphasized the need for reliable power, and that PG&E needed to do what it takes to stop the continuous power outages that we're experiencing in the mountains around Los Gatos. Also that day, I attended the Sawyer Rose exhibit with the artists at the Numu Museum. On 8/28, I attended a webinar for the Women's Equity Day event hosted by the Santa Clara County Commission on Women. On 8/31, the Community Health and Senior Services Commission met, and the recommendations are on one of our agenda items tonight. On 9/1, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, sole member of the Clean Air Foundation, met, and also later that day, the board meeting, the regular board met, both of which I'm board members, obviously. And on 9/2, I attended the VTA board meeting as an alternate observer, and I also attended the end of summer celebration.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And in addition to those that have already shared, the only item worth mentioning is that the Cities Association Executive Board did meet for selection committee meeting this, next Thursday. We are choosing a representative to represent on SourceWise, on emergency operations, and I know one of our own council members have applied, and so that will be a public meeting as well. Town Manager Provetti.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I first want to acknowledge all of our support for our wonderful police department here in Los Gatos. We have a great police department. Everybody in the department, sworn and unsworn, are absolutely committed to providing the excellence of services that all residents and businesses have come to expect. As many of you have heard, we are in the process of a leadership transition at the top. And I want to just assure everyone that as we go through this transition, our commitment to quality service is unwavering. So we are in process. There will be more information, but we stand strong to really serve all of you. There's been communication about our dispatch service, and so we are putting plans into motion to make sure that we have the support that our dispatch center deserves. Again, staff are providing exceptional services, and anyone who needs help should call 911 for emergencies and our dispatch center. We are here to serve you. We are absolutely committed to our community values of compassion and really making sure that all residents and businesses get the items that they need. Tonight on the agenda are two matters for council consideration, both of which support the good work of our police department. In addition, we are still recruiting for our Housing Element Advisory Board. Applications are due September 10th at 4 p.m. And then on September 20th, we are holding a joint study session with the Town Council and Planning Commission to discuss our general plan and housing, so that way the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and understand how this new plan might shape the future of Los Gatos. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Provetti. So our next order of business is our consent agenda. On tonight's agenda are 6 items. As has already been shared, there are items that have been that is of interest to people in the audience. These items are slated for approval with one motion, unless it's pulled. And so I look first to my council on consent 1 through 6. Would anyone like to pull an agenda item? Vice Mayor?
I'd like to comment on an item when appropriate, but
Okay.
not pull it.
Okay. Okay, I see no hands raised. So now we are going to listen to public comments. If anyone would like to make a public comment on item 1 through 6, now is the time to do so. We ask that you share your name with the clerk, and she will be asking those who have submitted their names to speak. You will have 3 minutes. We do have a timer here. Given the length of our meetings, we will ask the next speaker to come forward after 3 minutes. And again, these items are all slated for approval, but now is an opportunity for anyone to speak. Okay, no public comments. And so, Vice Mayor, I know you would like to make a comment, and then I will entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wanted to comment on item 6, which is approve an amendment to the temporary classification plan to align the temporary communications dispatch classification salary steps with the TEA communication dispatch classification salary steps. And so I guess first thing is I practiced calling the dispatch this weekend when I was driving down Quito. There was a tree blocking the right lane on my way to REI, and I called and reported it. And by the time I was on my way back from REI, they'd already had it all cleaned up, and our Park Service officer was just finishing blowing the leaves off. So I appreciate the quick response of that and the usefulness of how our dispatch can be. The second comment I wanted to make on this item is I did want to thank staff for bringing this forward. We, as many people know, we have been having difficulty staffing our dispatch, and this is one item to help us get through that. So thank you for bringing that and letting the council help you out managing this. I would encourage you to bring other such suggestions, where let council help, basically bring other things forward when possible, where we're having trouble staffing, and let us help out as we can. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Badami and then Councilmember Risto.
Unless Councilmember Risto was going to make a comment, I was going to go ahead and make a motion.
Please do.
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the consent items 1 through 6.
And Councilmember Risto, you had your hand raised still?
Well, I was going to make a comment.
Okay, please do.
I'll second the motion.
Yes.
I'll second the motion, and then if we're open for comment, I wanted to say in addition that my understanding is it's the police department, not the town council or the town manager, that recruits, hires, trains, and retains employees. And so to the extent that there was a shortage, I'm glad it came to the town manager's attention and to the town council, and that we have the opportunity to address this. And so I'm certainly in support of hearing from the police department when they have an issue within their department that needs outside assistance. I'm happy to hear that. So I would encourage that to come forward. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Councilmember Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudas.
Aye.
Vice Mayor.
Aye.
And I also vote aye, and this motion passes unanimously. So we are now at verbal communications. And so for those who have not joined us in past meetings, we do limit verbal communications to 30 minutes before we begin the rest of our hearing. If there are more speakers than is at 30 minutes, we will ask you to wait until the other hearing items have been heard, and then we will continue verbal communications at that time. Everyone will have 3 minutes to speak. And again, if you choose to speak, just provide your name to Ms. Neese. She will call each speaker one at a time until we get to 30 minutes, and then we will close, listen to other hearing matters, and then we will open verbal communications again. Okay, we're ready.
Brian Paul.
Good evening. I'd like to address the entire community as well as council. My name is Brian Paul. I'm the president of the Los Gatos Police Officers Association. I've been a police officer and a detective with the town for the last 21 years. I wanted to inform the public of a public safety crisis caused by the systematic dismantling of the Los Gatos Montserrat Police Department. Tonight, I'm focused on the collapse of the dispatch 911 center. The Los Gatos Police Department has 3 full-time dispatchers currently. This is a public crisis. So how did we get here? Dispatch center is budgeted for 8 full-time dispatchers and always been operated at 7 in order to save money. This is a planned operational cost savings by the town administration. According to page 33 of the town's 2019-2020 CAPR report, public safety expenditures had a favorable variance of $1.2 million and $839,000 savings reflected in vacancies of police officers and dispatchers. That money went back into the general fund. This is not the first year that the surplus has occurred. It's been going on for at least the last 5, possibly 10 years. In July 2020, dispatcher number 7 of 8 resigned and moved out of state. 3 months later, in October, 2 more dispatcher training started process. They both resigned, one in December, one in April. In December of 2020, dispatcher 6 of 8 retired after giving a year's notice. During the same time, dispatcher 5 of 8 takes leave, eventually resigns in 2021. We are now left with 4 dispatchers. All 4 dispatchers are working extreme amounts of overtime, solo time, and dispatch as well. In July or June of 2021, we hire a couple of dispatcher trainees. They're currently still in training, and our dispatchers given the additional task of training them, even though they're exhausted. In August, dispatcher Kelly Campbell has a conversation with her 4-year-old son. He says to her, "Mommy, I hate you. I never see you." This is disastrous for her. Also in 2020, dispatchers union went to impasse after receiving a 0% raise offer from U Council. Our dispatchers are among the lowest paid in the county and would require a 9% raise to bring them up to median. The town has taken a position that COVID has caused a loss of revenue. However, the Congress has given you $7.2 million in ARPA funds, and the additional financial forecast is better than originally appreciated. Adding to injury to insult, town manager Pravetti got a $12,500 raise in 2020 and a $5,000. Finally, August 31st, 2021, dispatcher Kelly Campbell resigned from her position. We are now at 3. All 3 remaining dispatchers are looking for outside employment. Today, September 7th, we take a vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Officer Paul. And I have to remind the Officer Paul, I do have to ask you to, I'm sorry, Officer Paul, but I'm making sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak today, and that includes you. We're here all...
I think it's unanimous, Mayor.
And no, it's not.
Officer Paul, this is my meeting. I gave you 3 minutes, and I'm asking you to allow other people now to speak.
Mayor, we're asking you, please.
We do not allow time to be succeeded to other people. Our policies of procedure. That is the town of Los Gatos' policy, and we're not waiving that policy. The speaker's time is over, and the next speaker can pick up from there.
This is cutting into verbal communication. We can sit here until 30 minutes is completed.
Well, you get paid by who?
I've asked you to remove that sign.
Can we give you the floor and we'll stay quiet? This isn't Russia. It's America. You guys, we're going to give him the floor. doesn't need a microphone. Good, go ahead.
We're calling a recess. We're calling a recess.
Meeting is adjourned.
Everyone, it's just- Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our council meeting. I apologize for the interruption, and I appreciate our police department for assistance tonight. We will move on to other business, starting with item number 7, which is to consider a recommendation from the Community Health and Senior Service Commission. We expired our 30 minutes for verbal communications, and so for those who would like to address the council under verbal communications, you'll have that opportunity after item number 11 tonight. So if we can move to item number 7, again, this is to consider recommendations from the Community Health and Senior Service Commission for the allocation of $500,000 of American Recovery Plan Act funding. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Council. You'll recall that back in June, the council had a meeting with the Community Health and Senior Service Commission to hear their analysis of what they perceive to be gaps in services to our adult community in Los Gatos. At that meeting, this council provided several directions. One was to create a subcommittee, which has been created at our last council meeting. One of the other items was to allocate $500,000 in ARPA funds towards restoration and enhanced senior services in the short term. And then you tasked the Community Health and Senior Service Commission with coming up with recommendations on how they thought those funds should be allocated. As you see in the staff report, the committee received 3 responses, one from KCAT, one from SASE, and one from LGS Rec. On 3 separate meetings, they reviewed those proposals, they spoke with the proposals and asked questions of the respondents. And at our final meeting, you can see the culmination of their actions. As you can see from the table on page 4 of 5, there was general consensus around the types of proposals they supported. You can see there was differences in the amount of dollars being allocated, but for the most part, you can see areas of consensus about where they thought it would be in council's best interest to allocate dollars. I do believe this evening that in attendance, we have representatives of all 3 of the respondents. We should have Melissa Torin from KCAT, Tyler Taylor from SASE, and Nancy Roulette from LGS Rec. And at some point when we do have verbal communication, each one of them will step up to provide an opportunity for Q&A at that time with themselves. With that, that concludes staff's report, and I am available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Councilmember Hudas.
Thank you, and I want to commend the commission and Mr. Andrews, your work in getting this to a recommendation. And I think we're very fortunate to be able to allocate $500,000 to restoring senior services at this time. One of the questions that I had was, in looking at the report in June, which was reviewing the work that the Senior Services Commission had been doing, there's a matrix of services and service providers, and not all of the service providers are a part of what we're dealing with now, and I just want to make sure that we're not leaving out anything that needs to be restored. So let me just rattle off the ones that I see that are not part of what we're dealing with tonight and ask whether they do need to be restored. Live Oak, West Valley, Sourcewise, Bay Area Older, and probably not the library, because I think that's within control of the town's budget.
Thank you, Councilmember, and thank you for acknowledging the work of the commission. They worked very hard and took the direction from this council very seriously, and so thank you for acknowledging that. In regards to the responses we did receive versus what the potential universe was in town, and given the goals established, it was really folks who were practitioners in providing senior services that could meet, whether it's a recreational level, whether it could meet, social gatherings for lunches and things of that nature. And so in that regard, personally, I wasn't surprised by the outcome and who responded. That being said, during the meetings, because we held an advanced schedule of meetings to make sure we got something to council in a reasonable amount of time, I do know representatives of Live Oak Adult Daycare, representatives of Live Oak Senior Nutrition were in attendance at almost every meeting, and they knew that we were soliciting for responses. And so in that regard, I think most of the population you described was aware that we were looking for proposals. In addition, I'll remind council, it's hard to believe it's almost been a year and a half, but back in, I believe it was April of 2020, this council took action and gave an immediate $10,000 to 4 additional groups, one of which was West Valley, and one of which was also Live Oak Senior Nutrition. About a year later, you took action again once there were ARPA funds and gave $15,000 to those practitioners also, and they are annual recipients of our grant program. So in that regard, funding has been provided to West Valley and some of the others you've mentioned, but they did not submit as a proposal for this.
Thanks. I think it's important because some of them are providing really essential services like food assistance and things like that as well. So, but it sounds like they've had their opportunity. They have other funding sources, and they themselves didn't need to submit an application for funding under this program.
I believe they were aware enough of the council's desire that if they wanted to submit, they would have.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. And so if we can open to our public to allow public testimony on this item. And Ms. Neese, we'll look to you to call each one at a time.
So I have 3 hands raised. One has been raised since verbal communication, so I believe that's what she wants to speak under, but I can call on her and we can determine that.
Okay, and so for the, before we begin, so again, we are speaking now with regard to item number 7, and so this is specific to community health and senior services, and so anyone who does speak on an item that's not specific to this, we will ask you to stop and to use your remaining time to speak at the right and appropriate time. So if we can, let's go ahead and begin.
The first one will be Donna Novi.
Should we move to the next?
She's unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything.
Can we move to the next speaker, and then we can return to this speaker afterwards?
The next one would be Tyler Taylor.
Okay. Okay. So if we could, for those that are watching via Zoom, if we could just take a momentary break to fix this technical. And I'm going to look to you, Ms. Neese, on when, or someone else with a little bit more technical experience than I.
And we can also remind folks that you're also able to dial in. If it appears as if the link for audio and video isn't working, there is a dial-in function.
So I've actually had 2 people, Tyler and Donna, and we can't hear them, but the Zoom participants can. So it's, I think, something with our connection. So I believe our IT went in to speak with KCAT.
And so for those that are watching, we are taking a break to make sure that we can hear all the speakers. And so if you're wondering why there's just silence.
Testing.
Yes, please, 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 please.
So we'll start again with Donna Nuri. Okay. Next speaker is Tyler Taylor.
Good evening, Mayor Sayak and Council. This is Tyler Taylor from SASE. Just making myself available for any questions you may have concerning the proposals from SASE. Thank you.
Okay, thank you and Vice Mayor?
So I wanted to ask Mr. Taylor, there's several SASE items and members of the commission have partially funded them. How much of an issue is it if we partially fund, let's say, like the newspaper or some of the other items?
I think when it comes to the items that were projected for funding, the health fair, the resource drive-through fair, and the outlook were the three that received the most support. I think the council, in terms of the town, I'd say the most bang for your buck would come there. The community-wide health fair partial funding, we could seek other funding from partners within the town to help get us the rest of the way there. And the same thing for the resource drive-through fairs. The outlook is an expensive endeavor, and so we would prefer to have a little bit closer to the amount that we requested in our proposal as it pertains to the outlook. With the other ones, we could attempt to backfill with sponsorships and contributions from the community for the health fair and the resource drive-through fairs.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Councilmember Hudis.
Thank you very much for the thoughtful proposal and the options. I had one question, which was, is there a role for our 60-plus residents to volunteer to be a part of your programs in actually helping to deliver them, such as the outlook? Is there a role for folks, for instance, to on a volunteer basis to help the effort, maybe by editing or writing or something like that, or perhaps some of the other programs? Maybe you've baked some of that in, but I'm very interested in that, since many of our 60-plus residents indicated that they themselves wanted to be part of serving the town. And so as sort of a service force, is there a way that you could incorporate some of our 60-plus residents into delivering the services?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a great question. When it comes to the outlook, there are several ways that the community can get involved. This most recent edition that just went out late last week, early this week, actually has a community-wide survey regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've so far received a very strong response from both the town and the city of Saratoga, which we will begin to reach out to folks and ask them if they would like to submit written works and articles. In addition, we do make available the opportunity for all community publications, so that it really reflects the sentiments of the people who live in the town. So we do ask for volunteer writers, volunteer editors, and so on when it comes to the publication of the outlook. The other opportunities that we have for volunteering regarding the health fair, it's a one-day event, and so we do usually between 50 to 100, depending on the size and what we're doing at a given health fair. We do source volunteers from the community to help us pull that off, and the same thing with the resource drive-through fairs. So there are activities that are designed for volunteering when it comes to our programs. However, I would like to just throw my support behind volunteer opportunities for the in-service provision by Los Gatos Recreation. They do offer the senior programming there on site in the town, and they would likely have a lot more opportunities as being the direct service provider for volunteering.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Aristo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I had two questions. One is regarding the Outlook. I realize that mailing is very expensive, and it is important for print copy to go, especially to seniors. That's often a preferred mode of communication. But I know right now, like, I receive the Outlook probably because I've signed up through the Rec Center for the 55 Plus program. And my understanding is your proposal is that the Outlook would be mailed to every single residence in town. And reflecting on that, I realize that does reach people that might not be searching for that information, and you never know who you're going to reach, or if somebody will say, oh, here's this program, I will tell my neighbor about it, or my parent or something. And so I can understand that it would make sense to reach every house. Would it be possible to perhaps scale it back so that the Outlook goes out maybe only 2 or 3 times a year with a note to subscribe to it, so that as we reach every single household, then give people the opportunity to subscribe so that it scales down and it's not hitting every single house every single month? Because I know that anything that comes in paper, most of it ends up in the recycling bin. But would that be a possibility to take the cost down? That was one question I have.
Thank you for the question. And so in terms of the scale, we actually are currently delivering to every home in the town. So it's actually not a scaling up. The reason why, there's a few reasons why we provided to every home in the town and in the city of Saratoga. One is that, the sentiment we hear a lot is that print is out of date. Only older people really want something in print. And, there's the big push to put everything online. The difference with our publication is that what you find in our pages, you actually will not find online. And that's kind of the point of redundancy when it comes to print media. You can find pretty much everything that you'll read in the Los Gatos Weekly or the Saratoga News on their website and the identical information. And you'll, of course, find more content online than you will in the paper. In the paper, you'll find a lot of real estate ads and not so much local news. So our paper does provide unique value in that it really reflects what's going on hyper locally, and we get a lot of engagement and feedback because of that. A subscription model, we have considered it. It's not something that we're currently looking at doing. We do like the reach that we get with every home, and we do also, for folks who would like to not be on our mailing list, we have folks that have called us and said, hey, I don't want your paper because of X, Y, and Z. And we do remove folks that elect not to have the paper from the mailing list. So there is an option for people to opt out of the paper. As we develop our online presence, we will have a little bit better of a content available online for the Outlook. Currently, what we have online is a PDF version of our publication. But we are looking at options, especially more content from the local community for there to be a little bit more of a rich content online. Since we are monthly, we would like to put weekly updates in terms of what's happening with things going on in the town. So our hope was that the town would see value in getting something out to every home in the area, especially when it comes to hearings or the general plan update and things of that nature, where you really want to get a lot of buy-in. So that's our hope around that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Neese? Did you have a comment?
So for the technical difficulties, the way that we're going to work around it tonight is as soon as you ask your question, if you can mute your microphone, because then we have to mute and unmute the laptop over here for the speakers. So when they cross is when we're getting the feedback. So as soon as you ask your question, if you can ensure you turn your mic off, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So my second question, actually, it's just a little thing, and maybe I'm the only one who noticed it, but I kind of object to something being a drive-through event. So if we had some kind of senior fair, it should not be restricted to people being in a car. I think we've kind of reverted during COVID to misinforming people that being in your car is kind of the safest, most convenient thing. And as our town is moving to more walking and biking, I would hope that we could take the word drive-through out and essentially create some kind of fair that people could show up in whatever mode of transportation they're most comfortable with. Because I have plenty of seniors on my street that walk places, or I've even assisted people going to the senior center a couple of years ago on the trail to use the bike pump to pump up their tire. So I know that not all seniors are in cars and not all seniors do drive. Does that make sense?
Sure. And, you know, the idea was born during the height of COVID when, you know, prior to a vaccine being out there and that, so at the time, that was the recommendation from the partners that we were with, including El Camino Health and others, to kind of make sure that folks were socially distanced and, you know, were provided with PPE and so on. But I do want to point out that no one's ever been, you know, asked not to participate if they walked up, biked up. And in particular there at the Methodist Church, where we held two of the resource drive-through fairs, we had folks biking up, walking up, and everyone was able to receive service. But your point is well taken, and we'll go back to the team with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Putis.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I had one other question. The survey, I know it didn't receive a lot of support from the committee, but I'm kind of looking forward to our new committee going forward and the data that could be valuable. However, the directions were to focus on short-term benefits. And so while I did read the survey that was used in Saratoga, would it be possible to add a question that would further explore short-term opportunities or actions that our residents might think could be included, so that, for instance, if the survey, you know, were conducted before the end of the year, the possibility of implementing some short-term ideas that they might have within, you know, the next 6 to 9 months. Would that be possible to expand the survey to include such a question?
Yes, absolutely. One of the good things about the survey and the company who does it is that it's a joint effort. They take feedback in terms of very specific questions that the group that is asking for the survey would like to have proposed. And so the committee that the council has formed would have input on that process and could actually help craft very specific questions to the community. So absolutely, that is something that we could include in the survey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. And next speaker?
Next speaker is Melissa Torin.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
we can.
yes,
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you have to turn your mics. So I first of all wanted to just thank the commissioners, Chairman Rossman, Ramil, Blum, Conrad, Commissioner Norcia, and Liaison Andrews. The commission was amazing in their approach to soliciting proposals. And I just appreciate all the time we spent and all the questions they asked. And I'm just very honored that they recognize that we have the ability to create a unique and inclusive and fun experience for our adult 55+ community. And I know it will be successful because we have endless opportunities for the volunteers, as I've outlined in our proposal, and for everyone to be able to engage in some aspect of TV and radio, which is an ever-trending environment, and people will enjoy becoming involved. And just to, Councilmember Hudas, you mentioned that will the volunteers be able to serve the town? Yes, because part of the program will be to train people to go out. For example, we're having a veterans memorial this weekend, and I have some seniors filming the event. So I'm looking forward to having senior volunteers all the time filming events in town and ribbon cuttings. And this is something I've wanted to do forever, for 7 years, actually, since I've been a KCAT. So I just appreciate the commissioners and all the effort they've put in, and just wanted to say thank you. And if you have questions, please feel free.
Thank you for Ms. Toren for addressing the question before I asked it, and I think it's really important, and it seems like that's an essential part. The question I have is, we have $855,000 in requests, and we have $500 to allocate. So I'm going to get to the bottom line of question. Would $100,000 for the next 12 months be enough critical mass to get this off the ground and sustain it, and with the possibility of an additional 100,000 being part of a longer-term solution that would be implemented in late 2022 or 2023? So that's my question is about whether we could get started at $100,000 level.
We could absolutely get started at that level. I appreciate it so much. I know I asked for 200,000, but with your awareness that we do need this seed money to get this program, big and going and exciting, 100,000 could definitely get the program started. It's fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. And our next speaker.
Next speaker is Hannah Pham. Hannah, you need to unmute yourself, and then you can speak. She's still muted. Do you want me to go to the next speaker? Okay. The next speaker is Nancy Roulette.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I want to echo the earlier statements of thanks and gratitude for the work of the commission over the last several months to have a very thoughtful approach to the analysis of the grant proposals. We recognize it's a challenge here with a proposed budget that exceeds the actual allocation amount. I want to make myself available to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Roulette, for the work in the proposal and for the ongoing work that LGS Rec is doing. I wanted to ask again sort of the question that I asked of the others, and that is there a specific role for 60+ residents to volunteer and be a part of delivering the services that you're asking to be funded?
Yes, thank you for the question. It turns out over the last 18 months or so, both in person and virtually, we've had over 6,055 plus participants in our programs. That means that the participants were age 55 or older, and we view that as a unique opportunity to survey them, to reach out to them, to connect with them since they already have a positive experience of LGS-REC, and to inquire as to their interest in volunteering. You'll understand and appreciate that up until this point, until midsummer, we really didn't have a natural opportunity to do that because it didn't appear to be as safe to participate in person. So we look forward to that opportunity. And yes, there's a special place for volunteers here in the community.
If I may follow up, is there a specific role that they would play in actually delivering the services as you've currently structured it? Is some of the, could some of the effort be actually provided by the volunteers?
Yes, in prior to the pandemic, in 2019 and especially 2018 and earlier, we had a very active group of volunteers who were not only involved on a tactical level, providing in-person resources and support, making appointments for seniors to make sure that they received additional resources in the community that we were providing. They were also part of the day trips and tours and helping to guide the efforts. So there are tactical opportunities for them to participate in a large way. And we look forward to the opportunity to plugging them in and making those experiences open and available to them.
Thank you. I had a couple other questions, and the proposal is pretty broad. So I had a very specific question with regard to the print. Is that part of the $384,000 or the $116,000 request?
That's part of the $384,000 request.
Okay.
You'll recall that was an email publication during the shelter in place. It's now moved to a monthly publication, both email and in hard copy. But we also look forward to making that more abundantly available and expanded upon in our 3 brochures that get published to the community and have a reach of over 100,000 citizens.
Thank you. I had 2 other questions. You've described part of the effort as an ARPA oversight committee. Is the effort, the time put into that ARPA oversight committee, is that part of the work effort in your request?
It is not. It is our recommendation that the subcommittee that will be formed by the commissioners act as a governing body to ensure the use of funds and the direction is in support of the town council's goals and the commissioner's goals for senior services. So it was our recommendation to put together a subcommittee that was acting on that in that capacity.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last question I had relates to the staffing, and in several places you address the staffing level that adds up to $265,000 in total. And so my question about that is, to what degree are these individuals supporting non-Los Gatos senior services as part of those estimates? And so, sort of part A is are these efforts exclusively for seniors, or are they shared with seniors and other members of the Los Gatos Saratoga community? And the third part of that is, are they Los Gatos only, or are they split between Saratoga and Los Gatos residents?
Thank you for the question. It's important to back up and understand that part of the proposal here was that LGS Recreation was committing a 0.5 FTE for all staff members who are working on senior services. That's part of their charter. That means we are just as financially vested in the success and outcome of this as the commissioners and, of course, the council. So I think that's really important to note. Some of their duties are involved in 55-plus programming. So it's not specifically seniors, it's adult enrichment, adult athletics. That's the piece of it that we are also paying for. It's under our budget, our line item. But everything else is dedicated exclusively to senior services. Now, in terms of our reach, we do not have a fee for anyone, an excess fee or a non-resident fee, if you will, for anyone who might be coming in from Montecito, from Saratoga, from the mountain communities. We serve that surrounding area, so we don't exclude people according to zip code or residency. So we're serving the broader community, and it's going to include Saratoga, Los Gatos, and the mountain community as well.
And next speaker. Thank you very much.
No further speakers.
Okay, so I am closing public testimony, and I turn it back to council members. Any questions and comments? Vice Mayor.
I do have a question for staff. So in your report, you talk about the survey. The commission decided not to put any money. Most of them put no money in for the survey. Staff is saying that you may want to have a survey for the senior service committee that's being formed. My question is, do we have to reserve budget money for that now, or can we let that committee that's forming determine if they want it, and will there be another opportunity for them to get funds for that survey at that time?
Thank you for the question, council member. Because the guidance from our council was a budget of $500,000, the commission was asked to work within that budget. And so they perceived everything as if it were awarded, it would have to come out of a $500,000 budget. Staff totally appreciates the commission's view on that because of their familiarity with the town and the familiarity with adult services. But I did think that it might be appropriate to at least present it to the new committee as an option for them, because they might distill a lot from it. And so currently, within the context of the budget that we were allocated, it would need to come out of that, but the council has their discretion as to if they would want to create other budgetary line items for that item.
Let me challenge that a little bit. So I think we allocated $500,000 for short-term, get senior programs up and running, and then we said, let's form a committee to figure out long-term. So it sounds like separate money to me, potentially. If the survey is for the long-term committee, that doesn't sound like our intention of $500,000 for short-term.
And that is, definitely within council's purview to decide which it would help. As Councilmember Hudas mentioned, the survey could add short-term questions, which could serve both purposes. But from a staff perspective, since it came as one of the proposals within the context of this, we viewed it within the $500,000, but there is still unallocated ARPA funds if the council wanted to present this to the committee, and if the committee deemed it to be worthy for them as they start off, we could come back with a budget request then.
Okay, I think that clarifies enough. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any comments? Councilmember Hudas?
Yeah, this is a pretty comprehensive area. Having listened to some of the responses, I wanted to maybe just put an idea out there that addresses all of it, and maybe that'll lead to some more discussion, or it could be turned into a motion. But I'm going to kind of start with the matrix, and I'm going to start at the bottom line of the matrix with the KCAT producers. I would suggest that we get started with $100,000 on that and evaluate it as a pilot and see how we go after that time. With regard to the senior resource drive-through event, I think we could rename that to be more appropriate, but to also let some seniors who don't ride bicycles to know that they could drive through. If we came up with I'm sure staff could come up with an appropriate designation for that, and to fund that at $5,000 since SASE felt they may be able to find funds for another portion of that. For the age-friendly health fair, I again would suggest not fully funding, but as the commission recommended, to fund it partially, and I'm suggesting $15,000 for that. I'm agreeing that the SASE services coordination should not be funded at this time. Sounds like that would be more part of a long-term solution, more effective to do that. With regard to the Outlook community newspaper, I would suggest fully funding that at $30,000, and that it's a valuable resource, and that I'll get to LGS Rec's version, but I think there's overlap with the print that's being proposed there. I think the Outlook community newspaper is reaching people now. It could be expanded to include more Los Gatos news, to include volunteers, and that we fully fund that. The LGS Rec service expansion, while certainly an interesting idea, I think that relates more to long-term than to short-term benefit. And then finally, with regard to the pre-pandemic service restoration, I suggest that we fund that at the level of $328,500, and to explain a couple of adjustments that I would suggest to it. To the requested amount of $383, one is to not include money for the print and for some of the community outreach activities. So there's a line item for $37,200, which is the outreach printing publishing. I would suggest not including that. And also as an incentive to be more specific about including residents as members of the team delivering services, I would suggest reducing the staff effort by a pretty modest $20,000 that would equate to less than 1 FTE of volunteer time to join the efforts of LGS Rec, and for LGS Rec to find a specific way to include volunteers that could take up $20,000 of what they've proposed. So I believe that adds up to $500.
Okay. Any comments? Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. Councilmember Hudas, thank you for that. It closely mirrored my thought process on the line items. So I would say that if there was a motion on the table, there would be a second.
Any comment or a motion? Vice Mayor.
So I was having trouble adding that up to 500. I must have missed some of the numbers. I had 100 for KCAT, 5,000 for the something through event, 15,000 for the fair, nothing for coordination, nothing for survey, 30,000 for the newspaper, and then you said 328 for the restoration. Did I hear a number wrong?
I think I skipped something, and the number for the LGS Rec was 328,500, and to include the community assessment survey, because I think we need to get going on that now, and our community hasn't really been reached out to in this process, other than making them aware of town meetings. I think it's time to start asking them what they need, but to do that by also asking them about what their short-term needs are, so that we stick with the intent of spending this money. But from my experience in doing surveys, we get a lot of great ideas from our residents when we ask them, and I think we should get started on that now. So I'm suggesting including 21.5 to do that.
And with that inclusion, staff does see it totaling $500,000. Thank you.
Any?
So the disconnect I'm seeing is we wanted to do a survey as part of the longer-term committee, but you're suggesting get started now before the committee has an opportunity to say what they think should be in the survey?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I believe the committee will get started in a month or two. The survey doesn't have to get formalized until then, but I think we should start the work on drafting and preparing a survey so that we can do it quickly. It doesn't run into next year, that it's something we could turn around. And I think, I don't think the money is huge, and I also think it fits within the framework for us to get started.
And just for the council's information, the committee has their first meeting scheduled on the 27th of this month. And if it were the wish of the council, I'm sure Mr. Taylor could be one of the first presenters at that meeting.
So then that seems like a reasonable motion. I'm unsure if you're making it as a motion.
Happy to make it as a motion. If it needs any further clarification, happy to do that, but I would make that as a motion, as the numbers that I've suggested.
Okay. Vice Mayor, do you have any further questions?
No.
Okay. And then any questions on the motion? Well, actually, I need a second for the motion. Councilmember Badami, would
I
you like to
second that motion.
Okay. Any questions or comments to the motion? Councilmember Risto.
So I have a question to the motion. So essentially, when we're reducing the amount of money for Los Gatos Rec, we are giving them specific direction on how that money is to be used. So we're saying that that is removing their print newsletter, and that'll be replaced by the Outlook. Is that what I understand?
I would suggest that they cooperate with the Outlook and to merge their efforts into what the Outlook is doing. I think it would be more effective.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions to the motion? Any comments? Okay, I'll call the question. Let's start with Councilmember Hudes.
Aye.
Councilmember Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Vice Mayor.
Aye.
I also vote aye, and this motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And we now move to item number 8 on our agenda, which is Creekside Sports Park.
Good evening, Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. A really good item for you with this one on this sports park. The utilization at the sports park has been huge between Los Gatos United, the soccer league, the lacrosse league, Los Gatos Saratoga Rec during the summer, and pickup games in the afternoon for just general rec use. It's pretty much used all day, every day, which has been a positive thing. As we worked through COVID, there were some challenges moving, especially the kids in and out on a schedule where they weren't overlapping and there were social distancing. The soccer league did an amazing job of scheduling that and making it happen, and making sure that the teams were complying with the rules and that things were happening the way that they had set it up. With that came a need to have a little buffer in between soccer practices so that folks could get in, kids could get in and off the field. And so we allowed a pilot program of having portable lights on the field. The soccer league did battery-powered LED lights, so there's no diesel generator, and they're LED, so they're a little bit more efficient. And really worked to make sure that they hit their deadlines of turning those lights off in the evening so that they weren't impacting the neighborhood in a negative way. We got 0 complaints in Parks and Public Works over the course of the last soccer season, and now as we're headed into the fall, the soccer league would like to implement that program again. So we're asking, since we did it as a pilot last year, for council's support in doing it again this year and potentially into the future. Ultimately, this may lead to a discussion on the need for permanent lighting, but at this point, it's just a temporary solution. The lights are brought in for the season in the fall when it gets dark early, and then they're taken out after the soccer season. Second part of the report, as this heavy use has taken a bit of a toll on the field, and we're headed towards that 10-year cycle where we expect it to need to do some field maintenance. So we've some capital replacement type maintenance, so some big expenditures coming. We've done a pretty aggressive job of maintaining the field on a year-to-year basis. So we go in and we treat the turf, we sweep the crumb rubber, fluff it up, clean it, make sure everything's very hygienic out there. But it's still showing its age a little bit. So we're looking in the next 2 to 3 years of needing to do a replacement out there. And that's to the tune of probably in today's dollars, $900,000, maybe $1 million when we get to the project. So a fairly hefty amount of money. I think the sports teams are willing to participate to some extent in that. We'd certainly be interested in hearing the council's feedback on what that might look like for the future as we're building in that direction. And so that concludes the staff report, and of course I'm here to support the discussion.
Thank you, Director Morley. Questions? Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I'm a little torn on the lighting. I know that, we need lighting, and if we're going to go past darkness. And right now, the cutoff time is 8:30 p.m., which then mirrors how late the light is in the summer. With the very name Creekside, are we running into issues with potentially disturbing the Creekside creatures, the fish and the other animals that are there that I know can be disturbed by light in an unnatural way? Have we gotten any feedback on that, or, do you know what impact we could be having?
Thank you for the question. We have not done a look from an environmental perspective, so that's something we would certainly need to do, especially as we're moving into a permanent solution, and a good reason to have that discussion tonight and things that we need to be careful of or take into account.
Okay, thank you. That would be a big concern of mine if we went to permanent lighting, but right now it sounds like this has been something that's already been going on. Thanks.
Any further questions? Okay. We will open public testimony now.
The first speaker is Hannah Pham.
Ms. Neese, should we call on the next speaker, or do you see? Oh, okay.
Should we? Pardon?
Oh, okay.
Hello?
Hello? Okay. So, sorry, we couldn't hear you earlier, and so your time will begin now. Ms. Pham, can you hear us?
She just dropped off. Okay. So the next speaker is Juliana Pendleton.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Juliana Pendleton, and I'm a lifelong resident of Los Gatos and the Environmental Advocacy Assistant for the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. Thank you, Mr. Morley, for a helpful report on the sports facility, and Councilmember Ristow for your questions on environmental lighting. I would also like to voice some concerns about the effects of ongoing usage of LED lighting at the Creekside Sports Facility adjacent to Vasona Park. I grew up playing soccer and remember when this facility first opened. My team and I were so excited to have a clean, usable soccer field to practice on right in town. Before Creekside, we often practiced at Fisher Middle School, where back then the grass was less than ideal. While I haven't played competitive soccer for quite a while, I know my younger cousin now really appreciates being able to have Creekside as a viable playing field as well. This being said, I am concerned about the lack of environmental review for this expanded lighting project for the sports facility, especially with the field being adjacent to the Creek Trail and Vasona Lake. Other cities have at least a 200-foot riparian setback policy for active recreational lighting. And while this project so far has been in tandem with natural lighting, there are more and more studies surfacing about the dangers of blue LED lighting on insect populations and other critters. Just this month, a study released found that cold light LED fixtures greatly reduced insect populations. I am extremely supportive of youth soccer and team sports and understand how late practices sometimes run, depending on field scheduling, etc. However, there is an environmentally responsible way to use lighting, and being adjacent to a riparian corridor puts more responsibility on this sports complex. What environmental safety measures are in place for these temporary LED lights? Is the correlated color temperature less than 3,000 Kelvin? How far away are the lights from the riparian corridor, and which direction are they facing? I think there should be some further environmental review on this project before council approves ongoing lighting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is ADF Mac 2.
Hello, this is Andrew Ferguson. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the ongoing lighting project. I wanted to explain my perspective so that you can judge my comments appropriately. I am a customer of the soccer league. I have 3 kids and 2 of them participate in the league. I'm also a financial sponsor of the league from my business. I'm a volunteer coach, and I am a board member of the Los Gatos Soccer Club. Most importantly, on this subject, the back gate to my home, where I put my 3-year-old and 5-year-old and 12-year-old to bed every night, opens onto the Creek Trail. I could throw a baseball or kick a soccer ball, and it would end up on the field. I have lived here since they started building the field. I remember the effort of some folks to stop it, and I can tell you that as a resident, there's no greater joy than hearing kids laughing and playing and enjoying sports outside. I cannot be more complimentary to Mr. Morley and to the mayor that during COVID, they had the courage to lead and allow our facility to have lights on it to extend the playing hours so that our children who were being failed by other institutions had the opportunity to continue to play and be healthy and be active. I'm here today to explain to you that we have 5 products. We have comp soccer, we have rec soccer, we have camps, and we have futsal. The 5th product is the intangible one, and it is the leadership qualities that we are instilling in these young people today. And you cannot put a value on that. Yes, fish matter. Yes, insects matter. But the youth that we are raising matter more. I'm here today as a board member to ask you for the opportunity to be a partner with the city, for the board and the club to have a voice, to share the financial burden, and to make this place a little bit better than the way we found it. There's a saying that the greatest leaders plant trees that they will never sit under. And I would like us, as we consider these things today, to consider that approach. Plant a tree that you may never sit under, because maybe your grandchildren will, or play on that field, or be part of a championship team that developed late at night under lights. I appreciate your time, and thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Sean Blakeman.
Hello, good evening, Mayor Syak, council members. I will be brief out of respect to many of the members who are still currently on this call and would like to speak, but only wish to echo the the words of Andrew Ferguson, and the fact that our soccer club in a very short time has had an imprint, not just locally, regionally, but also nationally. Our boys and girls are performing at a very high level. Our membership is growing. I believe we are far and away the largest youth organization in the Los Gatos community now. We'll have just shy of 2,000 players, about 975 in the recreational department, which predominantly plays during the fall season. And then our competitive has blown up to about 850 players as well. Our boys and girls are competing now at all levels and bringing notice to the town of Los Gatos for football. And we're very excited about that. And again, out of respect for the membership and the members that are on here right now, I yield the rest of my time to the members. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, Mr. Morley and Mayor Sayak, for moving quickly to get our kids back on the field last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Sean.
Good evening, and my name is Sean Del Grand. I thank you for the opportunity to share some views on this discussion, which I think is a very good one. I have 3 young children, 8, 10, and 11, who participate with Los Gatos United. And I know this evening we are talking about Creekside and the seasonal lighting and the ongoing maintenance required to create capacity. I believe when I think of Los Gatos United in particular, I believe that our biggest challenge is field capacity. And when I think about the children and the benefits of sports, from physical health to mental health to just fun and enjoyment and teamwork, there are just so many benefits for our children. And we certainly need great coaches and we need great facilities. And the one thing that I have experienced over the last several years of watching the director Sean Jacaris and Sean Blakeman lead this organization is that they have assembled a wonderful group of coaches who really are teaching these kids winning and losing and how to have fun and preparation and hard work and all of these wonderful life lessons that are so healthy for them. When I think about our facilities in our area in Los Gatos, I really just think that over the last several years, as we've traveled around Northern California and to adjacent cities and actually other cities and other states, as these young kids compete, and everything in life being relative, I have just been amazed at the difference between what we have to offer here in our community, which is just an amazing community, but relative to everywhere we go, as recent as this weekend in Redwood City, the quality of our fields, the quantity of our fields, the lighting of our fields, it is just all substandard. And we live in a community with that wants to attract young families and have this, community feel, and sports and children's sports are such a large piece of it. And so I just believe that lights create incremental capacity, but even at a greater level, I just believe that we need to invest time, energy, and really have a big vision with a clear plan and a high level of execution where we can have facilities that can just stand tall to our neighboring communities and really provide our coaches, our children, these families with the facilities that they deserve and a place where everybody can thrive. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Tara George.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Tara George, and I am a town resident and mother of 2 daughters who play for the Los Gatos United Soccer Club. On its face, this agenda item appears very innocuous, a request to continue lights at no cost to the town and an exploration of capital maintenance to the Creekside sports field. However, I hope each and every one of you recognize that this is so much more than lights and turf. The Los Gatos United Soccer Club does not focus on teaching our children just about the game of soccer. They are building a community and connections among our children. They are teaching our children the value of teamwork, how to be good teammates, how to communicate with each other. They are developing leaders. They are teaching them humility, resiliency, and the importance of taking care of your mind and body. In March of 2020, when the world shut down, Los Gatos United Soccer Club immediately pivoted. While our local school districts were talking about the importance of social emotional learning, our soccer club was putting it to action. They were the ones that were connecting with our children. They were present for Zoom soccer sessions. Coaches, directors made phone calls to check in with our children to tell them that they cared. They were asking numbers regarding juggling records. This soccer club did more for my children during COVID than any other thing. They are the reason that my children have survived the last 18 months. The increase in usage of the Creekside Sports Park is due in part because of the incredible job that Los Gatos United Soccer Club did for the past year and a half. The town can and should recognize the need for an improved and updated facility. As Mr. Del Gran said, we travel to fields all over Northern California and other states to play these soccer games. Our town should take pride in the maintenance and continued development of our facilities like we see so many other towns doing. I would encourage this council to work with the soccer club and other organizations to make the necessary improvements to the Creekside Sports Park. And for anyone whose child plays at Creekside, we look forward to a time when we no longer have to take black rubber out of our children's cleats and soccer because the turf has changed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Rob Bond.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Mayor Sayoc and the board. My name is Rob Bone. I am from the lacrosse side of the use of this field. I'm president of the West Valley Redhawks and a Chauncey Boys lacrosse club, both of whom use the field along with soccer. We've gone along handsomely, both clubs all along the way, and we continue to. Our experience, much like soccer, has been that we go to our Chauncey Boys Club is a travel club, and we go all around the state and throughout other Western states. And something that we see in other towns is a real investment in their youth athletic programs. And the way we see that is we see their fields, and we play games there at night. We play games there during the day. Standard is nice custom turf fields, good shape. And that's something that we don't unfortunately have here in this town. We have the motivation, we have the people, we have the kids, but we don't have the facilities. And we're constantly being squeezed. And I know the soccer folks have the same problem as we do over on the lacrosse side, is there just not enough fields. There's just not enough time for us to be able to get there and get our kids out there and spend time on the field. You know, one of the silver linings of COVID, if you can say that, is that last year we were actually allowed to place lights on the field. Not a perfect situation, but certainly better. It created more hours for our clubs to get kids out there, for the soccer to get kids out there, more opportunities to reach these kids and reach these families and bring the community together. The field has been placed in a very wise location as far as interference with any neighbors. There are certainly issues, or there are certainly resolutions we can search for for any concern for any sort of environmental problems. Really, lights is because we don't have, unfortunately, much land that we can develop any further in this town for fields. Lights has become our sort of final option for creating more time and field space. High school fields are getting more and more difficult for us to use. I pray that you consider this lighting situation and speak to your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
I have no further hands raised.
Okay, thank you. We will close public testimony, and I bring this matter back to council for any questions and comments and motion. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. So questions on the lighting. If the lighting is being provided by the leagues or provided by staff?
No, the lighting is provided by the league at the cost of the league.
And so if we think about the environmental use of it, I assume that means every time it could get set up differently, pointed different direction, different areas, and so forth.
The league's been very good about monitoring that and making sure that the coaches don't adjust it so that the lights are set up and left in one place. They're fairly low lights as lights go. They're not like what you would see at a football stadium. So their intent was not to broadcast the light broadly, but really to focus it on the field. They're set up on the creek side of the complex facing towards University Avenue, so away from the creek as much as possible. And they're turned off at 8:30. That's when they go off.
And so, I think Councilmember Risto mentioned an environmental review. I'm trying to, think about how well that works for sort of portable lights that could get changed. But the concepts to minimize the effect on insects and other birds and mammals and so forth is the color of the light, what color are they using, and then the direction so that it's not pointed up and can lighten the sky and so forth, or pointed towards the creek, for example. And then the other concepts are about intensity, right? Is it brighter than it needs to be? Is it on for longer than it needs to be? Is it covering more area than it really needs to be? How plausible is it for you to do some sort of review of that, and how long would that take?
So I think it's reasonable to have us work with the soccer league to do an environmental review and to have that to guide us or to bring back to the council for consideration. Can we do it for this fall? I don't think so. I think it's going to take us a bit of time to do that. But if this is something that the council is supportive of or willing to entertain for the future, that could be a next step that we would want to move towards. And I'm sure that our partners that use the field would be willing to participate with us.
Okay, thank you. All the questions for now.
Councilmember Badami and then Risto.
Question for staff. Who would bear the cost of an EIR, and what would be the approximate cost to do one? I'm used to seeing books that are about 2 inches thick from my time on the Planning Commission.
Yeah, we'd have to come back. We have to take a look at that and see what we'd want to incorporate into the cost. And I don't know if maybe Mr. Paulson can help me with the cost of an EIR or a limited look at this. But otherwise, we'd bring it back. And I would expect that if the field users are the ones that are benefiting from the nighttime use, that they would be the ones that would bear the cost for it.
Thank you.
And if I may, it may be that a full environmental impact report is not needed, that we could do the necessary biological and other studies, and then do other forms of environmental clearance, such as a negative declaration or other appropriate vehicles. But that would be something that we would explore through the environmental process.
Risto?
Thank you. First of all, to be clear, I did not ask for an environmental impact report. I believe one of the speakers may have said something about it. But I think at least for the temporary lights, I think what I would be looking for is just to make sure are the lights shielded so they're directional toward the field. I haven't been down there. I was on the soccer board for about 10 years. I coached. I am all for kids playing soccer, and making the best and highest use of this existing facility. So I understand that the lighting can help with that. I'm not opposed to it. Do we know what the Kelvin level is of the existing lighting? And I understand we may not have control over that, but I would be pushing for under 3,000 if we go to permanent lighting, and I would be curious to know if this lighting can be adjusted.
I don't know. I'm going to suspect that it's a pretty high number. That would be typical in something like this, which is trying to get that really bright light out there, so that really white colorish light. So I'm going to expect that it's much higher than 3,000, but that's something that we can include and look at options for.
Thank you.
I'm going to weigh in, and then I'll turn to Vice Mayor. Ms. Director Morley, I can't remember if you were here when the actual project was under construction. Because it was our facility, I believe we may have already done an EIR. And so do you happen to know if this was one of the areas that was identified as an impact, and if there was any mitigation that was necessary for us to do?
I'll have to look back at the report and see what was included in that report, and we can certainly do that as the first step.
Okay. And just, again, where I'm leaning towards this is that if we had already conducted an EIR and it wasn't identified as an impact then, I'd hate to hold up a full season. I understand if we want to move forward, but I'd hate to incur a cost if we've already done it. And perhaps, as Town Manager Pravetti said, we look at a limited analysis of what we can do to mitigate those concerns that have been expressed. Vice Mayor?
And when I said an environmental review, I wasn't thinking anything as formal as an EIR. I mean, those are needed for a required process. Here, I'm just looking for, intelligent review based on these concepts by somebody that's expert enough to be able to answer the question. I don't think we need to go hire a firm that makes sure all of the steps of an EIR is followed. So I think that's in agreement with what the mayor just said.
Would anyone like to attempt a motion? Yes, Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I mean, given that that staff doesn't have unlimited time, and that we were upon the season, and that we've already had lighting on a temporary basis, and what we're proposing continuing is temporary lighting, I would move to approve the continuation of the temporary lighting without being held up by any kind of environmental analysis, but in addition, looking at the initial EIR for this field to see if lighting was covered and what mitigations would be necessary, and to just take a look at what mitigations can be taken to decrease the impact of this lighting, making sure that it's shielded and pointed in the right direction, but that we allow this to move forward for this season.
Do I have a second? Vice Mayor?
I'll second, that's fine.
Okay, and are there any questions to the motion or comments? Councilmember Hudas?
I have a question for staff. If staff were to take a look at this and provide some information along the lines of what we've heard, how long would it take to do that?
So for the information that's included in the motion, we could come back with that fairly quickly. We'd, I don't know what method would be best, maybe an update of the status in the manager's weekly to give you a sort of a look at where we've been with it, what we've found, something along that line.
So would that be, at the next council meeting or the one after, roughly?
If you want another report back at a council meeting, then if we could have two council, the second council meeting, we would do that. If something in the weekly manager's report, then 3 weeks or so would be probably appropriate for us to get information to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Comments? We'll call the motion. Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Councilmember Risto?
Aye.
Councilmember Hudas?
I just wanted to make a comment, though, that
yes.
I would appreciate an update from staff before the end of the year on their evaluation of the environmental issues that have been raised.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, and the motion passes unanimously. And your comments, Councilmember Hudes, are noted. Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor.
So there was a little bit more in here, questions about rehabilitation of the field. And so I would just make the comments that I'm in favor of moving forward with rehabilitating the field and looking for partnerships with the leagues that are involved. I would add, I want to make, as we move forward with league partnership and they're putting in money, I want to keep in mind that it is also a public facility that's not just leagues, and that pickup times continue to be included.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, that was a motion, correct?
Sure.
Yes. And can I have a second, please? So,
I'll second.
Okay. And any questions or comments? Let's call this one. Councilmember Hudes.
Aye.
Councilmember Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Vice Mayor.
Aye.
I also vote aye. And this motion passes unanimously. And we now move to item number 9, which is a capital improvement program that was requested to come back after we listened to it last meeting.
Thank you. So just a quick summary. So at the last meeting, the council asked us to take a look at the scope of the project and the cost of the project, especially the latter, to see what we could do to bring the cost down. So we went back and looked at the project. We still think that the key, most important parts of this security project for the back of the Civic Center, sort of between the Civic Center and Pageant Park, is stopping vehicles and bikes and skateboarders from sort of unfettered access. We think we can do that with gates at both ends, which is a much more limited scale versus fencing the area entirely. So we've gone back and looked at that reduced scope and come back to you with a reduced price. So the original project we had estimated at $275. We think we can do it for under $110,000. So we're asking for approval of the project at that level and authority for the town manager to move forward with a contract up to that amount.
Thank you, Director Morley. I'll start with Councilmember Hudes.
So with this reduced scope, do we think that we would reasonably prevent the particular safety incidents that we had in that space over the last couple of years?
So I still believe that our original project is something that we're going to want to grow to, but we think it's a wise step to start with this one and see how it impacts the area and see what the changes are in terms of use, and then to move to an expanded scenario later.
If I just might follow up, so the specific incidents we had, there were a combination of vehicles entering that space and also skateboarders or others coming around. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've had a number of incidents over the years, but we've had vehicles that have driven down there and been the people in the vehicles been active in things that aren't appropriate for sort of dark alley spaces. So we would be able to preclude that. Those would be the easy ones. The bicycles, we think by putting a gate across the top, it takes away at least the speed of the bicycles. They'll still be able to get in there, but they won't have that big downhill ramp to race down. So it's sort of redirecting them down the roadway. So we think that may be a good step. There's still a potential that the bikes will go around it, especially mountain bikes, that be able to jump the curb and go around it. So we'll watch it. We'll see what the success is, and if it's fully successful, then great. If not, then we can bring that back in a future cycle through the capital program.
Thank you.
And Mayor, if I may, thank you. I just want to add that it's really important that we get started on this. So there is, as the diagram in attachment 1 indicates, what that longer term vision would look like, but it's really critical that we get started now so that we can at least reduce the vehicular access to only town authorized vehicles. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Oh yes, Councilmember Risto.
Sorry, I don't have a question. I do have a comment. I do want to thank Director Morley and the staff for coming up with kind of this broken apart, breaking this apart and saying, okay, what can we do for less than half the money that will accomplish almost all of what we need. And, I think the thing is, we were looking at a huge list of unfunded projects at the last meeting, and it was really hard to swallow something that big. On the other hand, I think all of us value the safety of our employees, the police officers, town manager, anybody who would be back there. And so I'm glad to hear that this will accomplish a lot of the safety. I also appreciate that this broken out part of the project that we would do first does not preclude or have a problem with when we eventually want to fence off the whole area, if we feel we need to do that. We've laid the groundwork and done the first phase of it. So I appreciate the way you came back with that. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could open for public testimony?
I have no hands raised.
Okay. And so seeing no hands raised, I turn back to my colleagues and Councilmember Badami.
Safety is the top and ongoing strategic priority for our town. And our town employees, they're not safe. They don't feel safe. They work late hours. They're short-staffed. So I would be in support of a motion to approve the $110,000 to beef up the security behind the Civic Center.
Thank you. Councilmember Risto?
I'll second the motion.
And any questions or comments to the motion? Yes, Councilmember Hudas?
I would love to get an update after this is in place, and if there's the need to accelerate the second phase, I would encourage staff to come to us, because for the reasons that Councilmember Badami stated, this is a safety issue for our employees back there. I went back there a few times. It's dark, and although it's close to the police station, it's also a very easy place to get access to. So I think we need to do something, and if we need to do more, it would be good to hear about it.
Okay, I'll call the question. Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Councilmember Risto?
Aye.
Councilmember Hudas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor?
Aye.
I also vote aye, and this motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We now move to 2 public hearings. Item number 10, which is consideration and adoption of an interim urgency ordinance of the Town Council for extending the water conservation.
Last one from me. At the first August meeting, the Town Council set in place the urgency ordinance for water conservation to deal with the drought, and set forward with that a number of conservation measures that were required in town. The goal there was to allow town staff to be the enforcement element of guidance that we received both from Valley Water and from San Jose Water. And so we brought that, the urgency ordinance is good for 45 days, and we brought forward a recommended extension that would bring the total time to 2 years for the urgency ordinance. I'm sorry, for 1 year for the urgency ordinance. And so that's what's before you today. I did add for this meeting a table that compares the requirements of the 3 agencies involved. I thought that was might be helpful to you because it's different. It differs from agency to agency. We did some picking and choosing from the list of all of those to the items that seem to make the biggest impact for the town, and that's why those are recommended in our urgency ordinance. Also wanted to just give you a bit of news. San Jose Water had a rate case that they pushed forward through the Utility Commission that now allows them to charge additional dollars for high usage users if that requirement comes down from the state. So they could also have an influencing hand in managing our water use locally in the future through the pocketbook. With that concludes the staff's report.
Okay.
So my question is, where we're requiring the restaurants to serve water only upon request. I know we've had that one in the past, and I always struggle with that one. How much water are we really saving? And it seems to me it's sort of an effect on people's health, right? If you'll hear frequently people don't hydrate as much as they should, and if you're not given a glass of water, you may not be thinking to drink it, and so I think, I know when I go to a restaurant, I want the water there, and I think it would be encouraging for people to be drinking more and be good for their health. So I'm really trying to understand, does this really make a difference? Can we get rid of this item without much effect?
Certainly the discretion of the council. I think the point of an item like this is to drive the point home to individuals that there is a drought and they need to consider every little use of water. But to your point of does it make a difference, probably not a significant one.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, and so if we could open public testimony on this item?
I have no hands raised.
Okay, seeing no hands raised, I look to council for a motion or comments. Councilmember Hudas.
I had a couple of questions that I wasn't sure if the public was going to raise, but we've had some correspondence on this, especially with regard to Blakeman Park. So I had two questions. Are measures being taken to preserve the newly planted oak trees and the redwoods, the redwood trees, especially in Blakeman Park? It looked to me like the area that has been cut off of water is also the area where there are redwood trees.
So the established redwood trees are in pretty good shape. Their roots are deep enough that they don't really benefit from our surface watering. The oak trees are rather new, a couple of years old, and we do water those on a regular basis. We did also make an adjustment at Blakeman to spread the water in a little more balanced way. So I think that that park and the neighbors are a little bit more comfortable with our approach at this point. We'll continue to monitor to make sure we're hitting our 15% target, but for right now, I think we've done some outreach to address some of the concerns there.
So I would just, urge that we keep a close look on the redwood trees. I've had large redwoods in Campbell die pretty quickly. They were benefiting from the surface water. I know there's an argument about that, but I would encourage us to have the town arborist or others keep an eye on those. Once they start to go, it's difficult to bring them back, and once they're gone, we'll never get trees like that for 100 years. So I think we have to be particularly vigilant about those, and so I would obviously support the motion, but I would also hope that we keep a close eye on that. And then the second question I had about Blakeman Park, I think you've partially answered that, but have we adjusted the water schedule to avoid excessive replanting costs there, perhaps cutting the time of water equally, such as 15%, as Ms. Walker proposed?
We did switch the watering up, so there are some areas that get a little bit more than a 15% reduction in their watering, but all areas are getting water at this point, and I think surviving.
And will that help us avoid excessive replanting costs?
Yeah, so our park turf isn't in great shape overall, so we sort of experience quite a bit of weed growth with or without a drought. So we'll still do the replanting where we need to. We do overseeding, which is an easier way of replanting. It's not tearing the whole thing up, and it's been pretty successful for us. So I think we'll continue that, and we plan on doing that in areas that get particularly hard hit during the drought.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councilmember Badami.
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment. With all due respect to the vice mayor, I drink as much water as possible, and I agree it's very healthy. But I wouldn't want to take that out about requiring restaurants to serve water only upon request. These restaurants have been burdened with the pandemic, and there's cost issues, there's service issues, there's dishwashing, there's glass breakage. So I wouldn't want to take that out. I would like to leave that in. So with that, I would move to extend the Water Conservation Urgency Ordinance in Attachment 1 for 10 months, 15 days, and let staff consider the comments of Councilmember Hudas.
Okay. Any second, Councilmember Risto?
I'll second that.
Any comments or questions to the motion? Okay. Councilmember Hudas?
Aye.
Councilmember Risto?
Aye.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Vice Mayor?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, and this motion passes unanimously. Ms. Neese, remind me, it's a continuance of an ordinance. Do we need to read it by title?
Yes.
Okay.
Extension of an urgency ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos for a period of 10 months and 15 days, declaring the existence of a condition of water shortage and providing for mandatory reductions in and specified prohibitions of water use.
Okay. Thank you. And now we move to our last agenda item, which is to provide direction to town staff regarding establishing contribution limits for candidates for council.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Effective January 1st of this year, Assembly Bill 571 established contribution limits for candidates for town council. Under AB 5871, candidates for town office will be subject to a $4,700 contribution limit from a single source per election. AB 571 does not limit contributions from committees to oppose a recall or to contributions for a candidate's personal funds for his or her own campaign. AB 571 establishes a default contribution limit. The town can establish contribution limits by ordinance or resolution that differ from the contribution. In other words, if you do decide not to follow state law, you could pass your own ordinance with higher contribution limits or lower contribution limits. If the town takes absolutely no action tonight, then it will default to the state level of the 4,700 and all the other requirements in it. But you do also have the option, if you decide not to take action, at any time you could take the item back up in future years and establish your own higher or lower limit. Additionally, the violations under AB 571 are punishable as a misdemeanor and subject to specific penalties and is enforced by the FPCC. However, if you decide to do your own ordinance or resolution to establish your own contributions limits, then we'll have to do our own enforcement of those penalties and of any criminal sanctions that would be issued if there are violations from it. So that's probably the number one reason why I think most small cities are following state law, is because you don't have to go through the process of establishing an ordinance or resolution. And also you don't have to worry about the enforcements. The forms are filled out just as they are now and will be enforced by the state. But that doesn't mean that there aren't many cities that are establishing their own campaign contribution limits, either above or below the AB 571. So in summary, you have two choices. You can do nothing, which means it'll default to the state. And again, that doesn't mean you can't take it up next year or the year after that if you find that you want to enact lower or higher amounts. Or you can direct us to come back with resolutions and discuss contribution limits and look at other cities. I didn't really do that much research in the Bay Area as to what other cities are doing. I think most of the smaller ones are defaulting to the state, but if in fact you want to, I could do that research if you think that's important to come back and decide you want to do your own ordinance and resolution. And that completes my staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Hugh does.
Thank you. So the do nothing, is that requires no motion or action tonight?
I think it's good to have on the action, just the motion would be to follow state law would be the motion, because I think that at least it's on the record that we took up this matter and decided just to follow state law.
So I would personally be very uncomfortable in choosing an option 2 without understanding what other communities are doing, particularly comparable communities. I actually don't care about the Bay Area. This is a statewide California issue, and so I would only want to get into a discussion about an ordinance with other, other factors if we understood, what other small communities are doing, how much they're setting their limits, how long they've been doing it, what are the trends, are some of them doing it and then dropping it, or the other way around. So given that, I'm not comfortable in getting into a debate about that. It sounds like we're not prepared to answer those kind of questions tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct. I didn't want to do all that research and find out you had no interest in pursuing it because of the enforcement issues and the costs associated there too. I can tell you there probably isn't too much data. One of the reasons why this was passed by the state is because most up to 80% or more cities don't have any requirements whatsoever. So I don't think you're going to find a lot of data over years. There's a few cities, but they're mostly big cities. Berkeley, San Francisco, maybe San Jose have them. But for smaller cities, there'd be few to none. So those have all been implemented just in this last year. So you're not going to get a lot of data how it's going. But certainly I could bring that back. If it's council's preference to do nothing tonight and a default, I could certainly just do a memo to council just showing here's what I found out from the state for small cities between maybe less than 75,000 and which ones have enacted their own, to kind of get a feel if that would help you in case you wanted to bring it up at a future date.
Okay. Any Councilmember Risto?
Thank you. I haven't really heard any discussion or concerns or issues about campaign limits in the past, and I think three of us have just gone through this process. We know how complicated it can be with FPPC, and I don't think I personally don't want to see us putting staff time or town resources into trying to replicate a state enforcement type thing in our own forms for slightly different campaign contributions. So I would very strongly feel that we should, I'd like to make a motion that we take no action.
Well, actually, we need public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you.
No worries.
Anyway, so I'm just not seeing that this would be a reasonable way to go.
Any further questions before I go to public testimony? Ms. Neese?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, there were no hands raised, so Councilmember Risto.
Okay, I move that we go with the default by the state, and by that mean that we take no action on this, and I would also be inclined to ask staff not to spend any more time on this. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Second.
Any further questions or comments? Councilmember Hudas?
I think this is something that we should watch. I don't think we should invest time at this point, but I think in 2 years, it would be good to bring this back up again and see what's happening. Not necessarily with a specific proposal, but just a report on what we're seeing as a result of this new legislation, and particularly focusing on smaller municipalities, as a town attorney has suggested, maybe under 75,000, but across the state. I don't think it has to be constrained to the Bay Area, but two years I think would be a good time frame to take a look at this again, because I think this legislation was introduced to protect a public interest, and I think it's our responsibility to take a look at that periodically.
And at the League of California Cities meeting at the end of this month, I'm sure I'll be with my colleagues and I'll ask them some questions of which ones are seeing any changes and how it's going with implementation. So, and I can report back to you for that.
Okay, so I'll call the question. Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Councilmember Risto?
Aye.
Councilmember Hudas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor?
Aye.
I also vote aye, and this motion passes unanimously. We are at the end of our public hearing, and we will continue with verbal communications. As in our first attempt for verbal communications, each speaker will have 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, we will ask the next speaker to proceed. And so, Ms. Neese, if you can start calling. Actually, before do you have any indication of how many speakers? Okay. So if we can go ahead and proceed.
Karen Rubio. Karen, you need to unmute so you can speak.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Apologies. Hi, and I'll try to keep this brief because I know it's late. My name is Karen Rubio, and I've lived in Los Gatos for 35 years. I'm a member of local grassroots group Plant-Based Advocates, and we're asking the town to include education and promotion about plant-based diets into the general plan that's coming up. Scientists forecast a temperature rise of 2.5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit over the next century, We're in a period of accelerated global warming that's already having devastating consequences. Climate change has turbocharged severe storms, fires, hurricanes, coastal storms, and floods, threatening millions. In fact, the Washington Post just reported that nearly 1 in 3 Americans experienced a weather disaster this summer. We now know that raising livestock is a primary cause of global warming, along with land depletion, water usage, deforestation, pollution, and biodiversity loss. In addition, the standard American diet based on meat, dairy, and eggs is the leading cause of most of today's diseases, such as heart disease, obesity, diabetes, and some cancers. Plant-based diets are healthier and use half the amount of water as a normal diet. We can improve our health, curb global warming, and reverse environmental destruction just by reducing meat and dairy production. In response to this existential threat, we are proposing to include plant-forward policies in the town's general plan. These programs will include education and resources for people to learn about and incorporate more plant foods into their diets. This initiative will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and environmental degradation, and there's widespread community support for it. If we're serious about ensuring a livable planet for our children, we must make changes now. Please join us. Before I go, I'd like to thank the mayor and council members for your leadership in promoting diversity in our community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Neese, any other speakers?
I have no further hands raised.
Okay, so I will close verbal communications. I will adjourn tonight's meeting.
Here,
and
I just had one more hand raised.
Oh, we do have one more hand raised. Yes.
Okay. Mark Robeson.
Hi. Good evening, members of the City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to participate. I came to the hearing tonight to listen and learn and hear what people have to say. There are rumors in town that there's a move to defund the police department, and most of my adult life I've taken policing for granted, and it wasn't until last year that I ever gave any thought to not having police. And neighbors and friends are obviously alarmed to hear that might happen in Los Gatos. Frankly, none of us have the facts, and are more suspicious than we are fact-based. But I wanted to at least participate tonight and let you know that I've lived in Los Gatos for many years. It's a great town, and the police are a part of that. And my friends and neighbors agree. We don't want the town to change, and we want to support the police. It's a priority. We think it's important. What I did hear tonight, at least from the town manager, when I was at the hearing at the beginning, is that she does and supports the police department. And I've known the city manager for years, and I trust what she has to say. And I believe that. I don't know all the facts and don't know what's happening with the town budget, but hopefully policing will continue to be a priority in the community. I know it's important to me and others in the community, and I hope that the city council sees that as well. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Robeson. Ms. Neese, any other speakers?
Ali Miano.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. First, I wanted to commend the council for your composure and courage this evening. I was watching from home and was very struck by the attitude of the crowd, and grateful when I heard that, yes, the police did come in and help handle the situation. I am one of the people who has called not for defunding the police, which is a label that some folks like to put on us, but to carefully look at the budgets and spend our money wisely. I've often talked about the time that I saw several police cars, an ambulance, social workers, and firefighters all come to apparently arrest one man who apparently had slept in the creek at Blakeman Park. That seems like overreach to me. It doesn't seem like a wise use of funds. And so that's what people like myself and others from the Los Gatos Anti-Racism Coalition have been speaking about. Let's use our funds wisely. Let's police where policing is needed, and let's provide mental health services where that is what is needed. And so, you know, folks can say what they want to say, but I'm very grateful for Mr. Robeson for pointing out that there are a lot of suspicions, there are rumors, there are things that, you know, people say on Nextdoor that just aren't true. And I think all of us would like to see police funding spent wisely, people paid fairly, and I think we can all agree on that. And so I just wanted to close on that this evening. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Ms. Neese?
Amy?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to confirm that we're on open verbal communications for non-agenda items.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to thank the town council members and especially Mayor Syop for their service to the town. It was very disheartening to be viewing on Zoom what occurred earlier at the beginning of the meeting after the police officer spoke. Basically, things just got completely out of hand and the crowd appeared very disruptive. And it was very unfortunate because a lot of time was wasted. I fully support the efforts of the town council. And again, thank you for your service. That's all I wanted to say this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
No further hands.
Okay. And so again, I thank everyone for participating tonight in a civil discourse. I close verbal communications. I'm adjourning tonight's meeting, and I thank everyone for tonight's patience. Thank you.